We have teamed up with the Witherslack Group to bring you a fantastic face-to-face meetup in Manchester next month. Tickets are free, with lunch included, and you'll be met with a host of amazing speakers. Sign up for Your Voice now at witherslackgroup.co.uk/yourvoice2022.
Hi, I'm Charlie Burley, the Teacher's Health Coach, and I want to talk to you about the first ever health and wellbeing event for educators, Rewriting Wellbeing. It's a full day dedicated to improving your health as a teacher through looking at your nutrition, movement, mindset, workload and wellbeing in school. You'll hear from our incredible lineup of speakers including Andrew Cowley, Jen Foster, Kimberly Wilson, Simon Bolger and many more. There'll be talks, workshops and time to network with like-minded colleagues. We'll look after you all day with brunch, lunch and all the refreshments. You'll get to meet our incredible speakers and our amazing team of ambassadors from the education space. It's a non-profit event with all proceeds going to the amazing education charity EdSupport. This isn't one to miss. I look forward to seeing you there on the 22nd of October at Etc. Venues, St Paul's in London. You can search Rewriting Wellbeing on the Eventbrite website to find out more.
This episode of Teachers Talk Radio has been made possible with support from Witherslack Group, the UK's leading provider of SEN education and care. They're here to support you too through an ever-growing offer of free resources, including webinars, podcasts, articles and events aimed at supporting teaching professionals like you. Visit their website at www.witherslackgroup.co.uk to find out more. This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Twilight Show. I am Harry Waters. It's great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got a wonderful show set for you today. It's been a little while since I've been here.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
I had a couple of weeks off. I don't know if any of you have heard of one of these, but I took a holiday. Which was quite rare. It was really nice. It's the first time I've taken a trip that didn't involve work for I don't know how long, but it's quite a little while since I've actually had a proper holiday with the family where I disconnected. I didn't look at my emails, not even once. I did look at my WhatsApp, so apologies for that one. But yeah, I did also go on Instagram, of course, because that's where Sustainable September is happening, and I couldn't leave that one alone. But yeah, it was lovely to disconnect and get away from everything. So yeah, I had 2 full weeks away from Teachers Talk Radio. I'm sure you all missed me greatly. I can hear you all crying into your Podbean app. But I am back. And what have I been up to this week? Well, I've been up to quite a lot, actually, since coming back. As you know, when you get back from holiday, it's all a bit... the first day, I found it quite difficult to adjust. I got up at 6 a.m., as I do every day, did a little bit of yoga, and then opened my emails. And yeah, as I hadn't looked at them for an entire week, it was just... immediately switch that one off and go somewhere else and have a look at the projects I'm working on. Luckily, by the afternoon, I was kind of clued up, but I did send a couple of emails, one of which was an agreement of work, which I'd been sent by a lovely publisher had sent it to me, and I'm working on a project with them. They'd sent it to me and said, here's your contract. Can you please sign it and send it back in PDF form? Absolutely. I read it 100% at 7 o'clock in the morning. I signed it and sent it back in Word form, completely ignoring the PDF section of it, of course. Then I reread it about 5 hours later and realized that I had to send it again in PDF. But they thanked me for the bonus Word one. It's something that I always forget to convert to PDF, but it is something we really need to do. I know when I was working in a school and we were looking through CVs and stuff like that, it just looks better if you've converted it to PDF. I don't know why. I'm sure there is a reason for it, and I'm sure my guest today will probably tell us that very reason. I have no idea why, but I always convert things to PDF, except when people ask me to, in which case I absolutely forget to do that. So that was my start of the week. But since then, I've actually managed to crack on. I did a full 5-hour session today. Of course, I didn't work fully for 5 hours because you need to take your breaks, do your movement. I've got my guest here on Zoom who's looking at me doing my movements. I'm sure he's nodding, saying they're good movements to do, Harry. Also, you do the 20-20-20, isn't it? You look 20 meters away for 20 seconds every 20 minutes. Luckily, I've got a window right next to me that none of you can see me pointing towards, where I've got my rose bushes. I look at my rose bushes probably 20 times a day. But I do have a wonderful guest, and I will introduce him very shortly. But before that, we're going to head off for the news. Hopefully, I tried it before I came on. Let's check and make sure it's okay. Here we go. Doesn't look like it wants to work, so I'm going to give it a quick refresh. Let's have a go here. It doesn't want to play ball. So in the meantime, I'm going to mention to you that the Witherslack Group are a leading provider of specialist education and care. They need people like you to help them achieve even more. At Witherslack, you'll be given all the resources and support you need, offered a clear path to career progression, and rewarded with some of the best salaries and benefits the industry has to offer. Witherslack currently have some fantastic career opportunities available to apply for. Check out witherslackgroup.co.uk/careers. Charlie Burley, the teacher's health coach, has a new event called Rewriting Wellbeing. It's a full day dedicated to improving your health as a teacher through looking at nutrition, movement, mindset, workload, and well-being in school. There are speakers such as Andrew Cowley, Jen Foster, Kimberly Wilson, Simon Bolger, and many more. There will be talks, workshops, and time to network with like-minded colleagues. You'll get brunch, lunch, and all refreshments included. It's a non-profit event with the proceeds going to the amazing education charity Ed Support. This isn't one to miss. It's on the 22nd of October at ETC venue St Paul's in London. You can search Rewriting Wellbeing on the Everbright website to find out more. It's also the 22nd of October is also my niece's birthday. Just a little aside there. So in the meantime, we have a fantastic guest, somebody I've wanted to speak to for quite a while, but I'm not going to say he was poached, but he was poached by a fellow host. So I waited and waited and waited until enough time had passed to not reinvent, of course, the wonderful Nick Peachy, I'm trying to find the words to describe him in a brief way. He's has many awards and accolades. I would like to refer to him as, I think, the godfather of ELT EdTech, perhaps, is one of those things that comes immediately to mind. Everybody's favorite teacher is another one that I like to say. A previous guest, Jason, mentioned that he was certainly his hero. He's one of mine as well. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining us. Can you hear me, Nick?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Excellent news. You're quite quiet.
Just finding the unmute button. Let's see if I can turn it up. Is that getting louder?
There you go. It's perfect. I also had to turn my volume up as well. So, Nick, before we continue, thank you so much for coming on. And could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? Because we only have just over an hour. If you tell everyone everything about yourself, then that will take the full hour.
Yeah, okay. So I guess a bit about myself. I've been teaching, got into English language teaching kind of accidentally about 30 years ago. I started off as a guitar teacher. I studied music and taught guitar in the local prison while I was a student, and got into teaching that way. And when I finished my degree, I thought I'd go and do a bit of teaching and save up some money. I'm still trying to save the money 30 years later, but
Oh, don't you
so
know it?
but and I sort of, but I got really hooked on teaching. I did my CELTA in Cairo and worked with refugees there and worked for International House there, and it really kind of hooked me in. And so I went from teaching to teacher training, did a master's in educational technology, and started sort of got into the ed tech thing about the end of the last century, which makes me sound kind of old, doesn't it? And which I am. And I kind of got hooked on that and went freelance for a while. And I've been doing sort of teacher training and developing products and helping ed tech companies. And back in 2016, I won an Innovations Award for the first book that I wrote on digital video, and that sort of kicked off Peachy Publications, which is, what is kind of my side hustle now. I still do sort of contract work and still have the day job and do writing work and consultancy work for people. But in my free time, I put on my cape and become, Nick Peachy Publications and produce my own materials and sort of, push that digital materials agenda a bit. Yeah,
It is, and I'm going to say thank goodness that you did get into the EdTech game back when you did, because I know that it's helped me an awful lot. A lot of what you've done, and I've looked at various bits and pieces, and even more recently, you helped me an awful lot on a project I'm working on, which we will talk about. But you mentioned the Innovation Award that you won back in 2016. You've been a kind of a mainstay at the Innovation Awards since then, pretty much, haven't you?
Well, the one in 2016 was my second one, actually. I won one in 2012 too, and I've been shortlisted 6 times. So, I keep sort of pushing things in there. I don't have anything in there this year, so I don't know if I even get an invite this year. But yeah, so but I keep trying to sort of push things forward and come up with new ideas and new ways of approaching things and things like that. But
I'm very lucky that this year one of the projects that I spearheaded, it's my first ever nomination this year. We've been nominated for Student Resources for Speak Up for Sustainability, but I don't know if I'll get an invite anyway, because it's for a large publisher. So, they'll probably want their people there just in case they win the award, despite the fact, I'm not going to say I did all the work, because I definitely didn't. There was a brilliant team that worked on it, but it was a hard slog. It was a hard 6-month slog, but it's really exciting to have been nominated and shortlisted. So
yeah, it's always great when you look at all the other people up there and you think, wow, I'm up there with these. That's really, it's really quite an honor.
Exactly. It's I was just delighted. I know there are pluses and minuses, positives and negatives, as there are with everything. And some people have their opinions of various award ceremonies and such. But for me to have been nominated for this, it's kind of validation for taking that step into freelancing and pushing the kind of sustainability focus as well, because it's when I started working on sustainability ideas back in my classrooms. It must have been in sort of 2010. There was nothing done of it, and then slowly I started to see things coming out. And the last few years, it's been wonderful since ELT Footprint came about. That there are more and more people talking about it, and it's wonderful to see that it's been nominated and we have this opportunity.
Yeah, that's great.
But yeah, we're not here to talk awards. Oh, thank you so much. We're not here to talk awards. we're here to talk more about tech, and more specifically, let's start off by talking about Telegram. Now, I was approached by a few of my friends here in the village, telling me to get Telegram on my phone. To which I said no. I've already got WhatsApp. I've already got Facebook. I've already got Instagram. I've already got this. I've already got that. I didn't want more messaging apps for me to not message people. It's remarkable how well connected we are, yet how we don't speak to people very often.
Yeah.
My brother lives in Australia, and I've not spoken to him in about 3 months. So, that's my own fault. But yeah, when they mentioned I should get Telegram, at first I said no. And I didn't get it until I started working on a project with teacher training with teachers in Venezuela. And I didn't know why. And I didn't know how to work it. And there were all these brilliant videos that I got to watch that you made, obviously. And I sat there and I watched them. I didn't realize quite how wonderful a tool it was until I got into it. So can you tell us a little bit more about the whole idea behind it?
Yeah, I mean, I had the same impression as you at first. I understood it to be a kind of messaging app that, was quite good on privacy kind of thing. And as I don't have much private conversation, I thought, why do I need that? But then when this project came up and we looked at, teachers in Venezuela have this and they use it a lot because of the privacy in a lot of ways. And so I thought, okay, well, let's have a look at what you can do with it. And it's a marvelous app. You can do so much with it. You can build your own social media stream if you want to. You can build blended learning. You can build online learning. You can deliver webinars, live webinars, and screen share on it. You can have students working on groups and deliver kind of remote learning on it. It's just fantastic. So, I started off making those videos for training there, and I got so into it that I wrote a course about it and published a course on teaching with Telegram. So, we've had about, I think, 80 or 90 teachers on that so far. I was really sort of knocked out because when I did my master's in educational technology, my tutors were Diane Sloughty and Gary Mottram, and Gary Mottram did my course on Telegram. I was like, oh my God!
Oh, that's amazing!
This is so much, that was kind of. I still haven't dared ask him what he thinks of it. No, well, it's crap. We're ashamed of you.
It was a terrible course.
Yeah, what are you
doing? I had no idea of its potential, and I'll be honest as well. Even when I started using it and I started teaching with it, it wasn't until probably the fourth or fifth hour, the fourth or fifth class, that I actually started to realize its potential, because it's not quite as intuitive as using Zoom when you're doing a web class where you click, share screen, you do breakout room. There are things that you have to do to kind of get around that. You have to set up the groups beforehand and stuff like that. But by the end of the course, there were 10 classes. We're starting again with the next module in a week or so, actually. By the end of the course, I could see how much I developed as a trainer, but also how much the teachers had developed themselves in using it. Because at first it was rainy season in Venezuela. So teacher, I have bad connection. This was as soon as we got started. So then it would just be me. The first week was just me sitting there talking through a PowerPoint. And how there's nothing more mind-numbing than that. And I just thought the only reason the teachers are coming to this at the moment is to get a certificate. They're not learning from this, because this is just me talking about this. It's not interesting for them. They're not getting enough from it. There were a few messages in the chat, but nobody wanted to open up their microphone, and nobody could turn on their camera because their connectivity wasn't great. And even though Telegram uses less bandwidth, they weren't able to because it was rainy season. Hopefully it isn't anymore. But as we went on, we used these kind of breakout rooms these other groups where they could go in, and I could just immediately see them. Well, they turn on their microphones a bit more, and then later on they started turning on their cameras, and by the end of it, there wasn't enough time to finish the PowerPoint. There was enough content in the PowerPoint for an hour, but when you've got the students, the teachers, the participants there actually speaking and participating, it uses up a lot of that time. So it was just amazing for me to kind of start to learn that. And I guess I need to take your course, to be honest, because I need to know more. So what else can we do with Telegram, and how can we do it?
I mean, one of the things that I'm really into at the moment is I started an EdTech and ELT updates channel. And on this channel, I can share links. I've built a sort of a community part of it as well, so people can participate if they want to. But I share links, and after you share links, you can just click on this little button and record a 1-minute video to talk through what the link's about. So it really sort of enables you to sort of project some of who you are into the feed, rather than it doing just this sort of bland feed with, here's a link to this, here's a link to that. You can actually talk about things, and it's really quick to do. So it's quick to update. So it doesn't take up too much of my time, and you kind of really build, you enable people to kind of engage with you a bit more as well. So that's one of the things that I like doing with it.
That's brilliant. Like, for those of you who couldn't see me, my mouth was just left gaping by that one, because that's the kind of thing that when you have these online classes, these online groups once a week, you give them their homework to do. They have to go off, they have to do their pre-course task or whatever. If they have that opportunity, to find an interesting link and talk about it at some point during the week, that means that they're going to be more involved. They're going to be not only thinking about it 5 minutes before.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And, I think it's often, though, with like your experience of working with the Venezuelan teachers, is it starts slowly, and they start off with the microphones on, but as they build confidence, they turn the camera on. It's kind of amazing how shy teachers can be about turning the camera on. We all teach in front of lots of people who are looking at us the whole time. We go to conferences and talk, but when you put somebody in front of a camera and they can see themselves, all of a sudden they become very shy. It's an interesting phenomenon, I think.
It really is. No, please go on.
I taught a course years ago on, it was Moodle-based course, but one of the tools we used was this little tool for recording video clips of yourself talking to engage with your students. And it was amazing how shy the teachers were. And I had a couple who would wear hats and dark glasses, and I had a guy actually in Seville who he would come on and he'd have a bucket over his head with eye holes cut in it and things like that. He got really extreme, and a big hat on top of the bucket, things like that. But it's amazing how shy teachers can be. But it is a great way to develop your teaching and a better understanding of your body language and how you're using it. I think that's something that I've really got from Zoom as well. From doing so many sort of video conferences and sort of video presentations over the kind of last couple of years, you stand up in front of the camera and you see yourself, you're monitoring yourself, and you start to sort of think, oh yeah, I could use this a bit more, and work with the body language a lot more, I think. And that's important. I think that hopefully when I go back to speaking physically again, my body language will be better, and that will have improved what I do.
It is so true, and like I can see Nick here, and it almost feels like a mirror image, because I throw my arms all over the place while I'm giving talks online, and when I'm doing it face to face as well. But like you say, these like couple of years of being able to observe yourself have been so useful for me with that kind of thing, with my body language, with my pacing and stuff like that, and sometimes realizing maybe I need to move my hands less than I do. My wife often teases me for various reasons, but one of them is I have this movement where I'm obviously I repeat my hand movements forwards and forwards and forwards, and I keep doing it to like show sequencing. And I really noticed this with this kind of online switch, and it has been remarkable for me this whole switching to online for my own personal development. And as you say, with these teachers in Venezuela, I think one of the biggest issues when it comes to the whole shyness factor is they're English teachers, but maybe their English level isn't quite what they hope it would be.
Yeah.
So when they're faced with, now I'm just going to say an experienced English teacher, with a proficient level of English. When they're faced with that, perhaps they get a little nervous as well. I know when I used to speak in Spanish, I had quite a lot of inadequacy. Not when I was speaking to people who could speak, not when I was speaking to people from Spain, but when I was speaking to people who were, English speakers who could speak Spanish really well. I would get shy then, and I'd kind of go into myself a little bit. And until I learned to lose that shame, then I didn't really improve very much with my Spanish. And I can see that with the teachers with their English.
I think often there's a lot of fear as well, because they actually, in a lot of times, they actually don't know how good they are, because they're teaching English, they've learnt English, but they don't often get that much opportunity to interact in English. I mean, I think Ventisol, the Teachers Association in Venezuela, is great, because when they get together, they still use English together, and and that must be really difficult. And but to know that you could do it so much easier in your first language, but they sort of really push to use the language. But it must be quite difficult if you haven't spoken to anyone for a while to know, well, am I any good? Are they going to understand me? What happens if they don't understand me? And all my peers are around me, and they're thinking, oh my God, he's supposed to be an English teacher. What's he doing? But
it's exactly
it must
that.
be stressful, yeah.
It's exactly that, with their peers in the chat with them, in the Telegram conversation at the same time. It seems like that's the main fear, that they they don't want to embarrass themselves in front of their colleagues, because maybe one of them has a better level of English, or not necessarily a better level, but a better conversational level. Because as you say, when you've been teaching anything really for a while, it sometimes, particularly with English, and particularly if you're teaching the kind of same year group year after year, you end up teaching the same thing again and again and again, and you go in with your same kind of lesson plan, and in the end you've got your lesson on the present perfect, then you're going to go in, you're going to teach your lesson on the present perfect, and that lesson, your English is perfect, because you know that lesson like the back of your hand. But as soon as you come into a kind of conversation that's new things are thrown at you.
There's lots of unknowns going on, aren't there, when you're in real conversation? It's difficult. But I want to just sort of go back to some things that you were saying a bit earlier about, having to use Telegram and going into Zoom and these last sort of 2-3 years. And I think, despite the fact that the pandemic was a really terrible thing that happened, I think, it's pushed English language teaching, the use of technology, teachers' knowledge of technology so far forward in that time. It's really, accelerated people's acceptance and engagement with it as well. And I think, if there's anything good that's come out of the pandemic, I hope that that's it, really. I mean, personally now, I feel, I look around at the sort of things teachers are doing with technology, and I start to think, well, maybe maybe I don't need to do this anymore. Maybe I'm not up to it. Maybe things have gone past me now, and but I think it's really good that so many teachers have really engaged with it and embraced it and done some marvelous things.
There really are some incredible things. A big shout out to Charlie of Charlie's Lessons, of course, who immediately springs to mind when we're talking about kind of ed tech and that kind of thing. And that has, his passion for that did spring from the pandemic, because he's a director of studies and he had to get his head around a lot of these things. And it's there have been some wonderful things to come out of it, and it's quite bizarre for me because I look at my mum, who's also an English teacher. She actually followed me into the profession. She retired. My father and her both retired at 50 because people could then. Not as easy anymore. But they then saw what I was doing, and they followed me into the profession, and they travelled around for about a decade and lived in Spain and Poland and Latvia and Germany and Italy and France. And they did an awful lot of teaching. Then they went back. They now live in Wales, and they kind of had a hiatus from teaching, which started around March 2020 and ended when my mum started doing a few classes again, probably 4 or 5 months ago. And the first thing she did was she got on the phone and was just like, it's so hard, this online teaching. It's so difficult. Like, it's just not the same. And that's because her hiatus coincided with that intensive training part where, every teacher on the planet was thrown into, you have to teach online now. And there was that instant kind of, I'm going to call it a Zoom training. It wasn't necessarily Zoom, it could have been Teams or Google Meet or whatever. And I've not ever seen any profession in my life adapt so quickly to something. I'm not going to say seamlessly, because it wasn't seamlessly.
No, it wasn't.
But, with so adeptly to be able to do that and to come out of it, with these flying colours.
Yeah, and I certainly hope, a lot of that is retained. I hope people don't just sort of think, oh, well, we can go back in the classroom now and let's forget all that stuff. I hope people sort of keep that and think about what they can take back into the classroom and the physical classroom to make that experience better.
Well, yeah, we were talking beforehand about conferences and such. We are, I guess, fans of conferences. I mean, I like conferences. I like learning from other people. It's one of my favorite types of CPD. And conferences are a wonderful place for that. And yeah, this idea of now we can go back to face-to-face, we automatically go back to face-to-face is an idea that maybe should be challenged. And yes, let's have face-to-face, because I love face-to-face conferences, but let's use the tech that we've got and let's make them hybrid and make them available to everyone across the world.
Yeah. Certainly, I think we should be doing that. I mean, the thing that worries, in a way, one of the things that worries me most about the face-to-face conferences, again, is sort of an issue that you have, which is, your footprint, your kind of environmental footprint for all these people flying to this place. I mean, I've signed up for IATEFL to go to IATEFL next year, and I'm thinking that's nearly 2,000, maybe over 2,000 people now getting flights, to do something that we could do online, and I'm sort of wonder. I mean, it's great to be there and it's great to meet people, and it isn't just about the learning. It's about seeing people that and having chats in the coffee while you're having coffee and stuff like that. But it's just a huge impact on the environment to keep having these things.
Exactly, and another thing is the kind of accessibility of it as well. IATEFL, for example, isn't exactly cheap to get to in terms of everything, and all conferences in general aren't exactly cheap to get to, and having that kind of hybrid option, something that Innovate ELT are doing this weekend, actually, it does allow for that opportunity for the less expensive option as well, for the hybrid option where you can perhaps pay a slightly smaller fee, and perhaps you don't get as much from it, but also it leaves the opportunity to record all of these wonderful webinars and such. And in terms of a hybrid conference, for me, all that really needs to be is a camera. It's not the same as a hybrid classroom. You don't have to have the same connectivity with your students. I love hybrid teaching, to be honest. I know a lot of people absolutely loathe it. I think I love it because I only have one class, which is hybrid, and they were kind of cherry picked as well. And now we've been doing it for 2.5 years. we've very much gotten into the routine of it. I love having the two classes in one. I think for a conference, it's tailor made for that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, sort of most speakers are basically just, speaking, like delivering a lecture kind of speaking. I know that, most of us try to get some interaction and some pair work going and things like that. But, it's not too demanding to sort of actually involve people who are also online. I don't think that's not a big ask. Most of the conferences that I've done for the last few years, even before the epidemic, I was using a back channel with them so that people could interact with each other through the back channel. So that's which is like sort of having chat on when you're doing a Zoom, if you like. So I think it's not a big ask to sort of handle that. Really.
Yeah, chuck a computer and a webcam in there, and
Yeah.
and you're good to go. I think it's a trick that's maybe not being missed, but kind of being overlooked because conference organizers want to have bums on seats, as it were. You want to have the paying customers turning up and going there rather than saying, well, if I can watch this from home. But that idea that, particularly developing nations, they've had so many opportunities with the pandemic to learn from experienced people from across the world. I know for me, the opportunity to see people like, Tyson Seaburn speak, it was not something I had without the pandemic. And, I could sit there and watch these webinars. And I think it's taking a bit away from those, which we've been handed this opportunity on a platter with things like Telegram and Zoom.
Yeah, certainly think it's something we should maintain, definitely.
Absolutely. So I want to talk a bit more about EdTech, because it is, I'm not going to say your speciality, but it's certainly what you're known for, as well as guitar teaching, apparently. On that, guitar teaching, who's the greatest guitarist of all time? Something I ask all guitarists.
Probably Pat Metheny, I think. He's a jazz guitarist. Stupid story. I first saw him play when I was about 18, 19. I was at home and I sort of walked into the room and my brother and sister were watching Joni Mitchell concert on the TV, and this guy was playing guitar for her, and I had never heard anyone play the guitar like that, and I decided I want to do that. And as a result of that, I ended up doing a degree in music, and instead of being a cleaner, which I was before.
Oh, there you go. Brilliant. My favorite, I'm not a guitarist, but my favorite guitarist is Paco de Lucia, who's obviously a flamenco guitarist. It's a great debate to have. It's especially a good debate to have when there's more than one guitarist in the room. To just kind of drop that in there and just walk off and watch them fight about it. That's something I love to do when I'm with my uncle. Anyway, slightly off topic there. Going back to EdTech, you said you started in the kind of the early part of the century. You said, which, as you say, made it sound like a long time ago.
I guess the late part of the last century, actually. I think I started my master's in educational technology about 99. And 98, 99, and my first sort of EdTech teaching job was in 98, and at that point it was with a company called Net Languages in Barcelona, and at that point students would sort of download interactive activities, do them on their computer, and then they'd telephone me for the speaking part kind of thing, and I'd check through their sort of online work, and then I kind of got into online environments and learning environments, and I used something called NiceNet, which was a kind of an LMS where you could sort of upload your students, they could interact through messages and post their work on there and stuff like that. That was about 99, 2000. And
you've literally seen it all.
I don't know if I've seen it all because, educational technology actually goes back quite a way before that. The CAL, as it used to be known, computer assisted language learning, was very big in the 60s, and in the 50s, Skinner and his teaching machines, he had these kind of machines that had these paper rolls in, and students would sort of fill a bit in and then wind a handle and get the answers and then fill another bit in, like your kind of gap fill and answers kind of thing. So these things have been, it's not as new as people think. It's interesting because I had a conversation just after the pandemic started. I got called up by a couple of school directors, and they wanted to have a chat about what they should do and things like that. And one of them said to me, he said, it feels like we've been dragged 10 years into the future. And I said, well, actually, not really. You've been dragged 10 years into the present because, things like Zoom, Adobe Connect, things like that, they've been around a long time. They're not new, they've been around sort of 10, 15 years at least. So this isn't something that we've suddenly been able to do because of the pandemic, but there's been a lot of resistance, I think, through within teaching and, within English language teaching to these kinds of technologies. And now that's sort of going, I hope.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that about Zoom. About maybe a year prior to the pandemic, I did a podcast on Zoom, and it was my first experience with it. And I realized in that moment that this was a wonderful tool for online teaching. It was considerably better than Skype, which was a horrible thing. And yet I realized, so when it did come around to it, it was something I'd actually had experience with and had been working on, which was lucky for me because it meant I could help other people. And as a teacher, that's what you want to do, isn't it? You want to help people. And that kind of fell into my lap, as it were, because I had used it previously and most people hadn't even heard of it.
Yeah, I spent a couple of years from 2014 to 2016 working with an online school and called English Up, and we had 70 teachers around the world, and they taught students in Brazil using something similar to Zoom, and the company struggled quite a bit, and we decided to we built a platform, and we decided to go and sell it to schools. We thought it was a great idea to go to schools and say, look, you could set up your own online school. And we went around all these different schools, particularly here in the UK, trying to convince people that this was a great idea. And they were, there were some of them were literally like, get out of my office, what are you doing here? And I kind of think now I'd like to have a chat with those people again now and see how they feel about it. But it was really, it was just an impossible sell. And in the end, the company just folded up,
Yeah, for me, I remember using WebEx as well a while back, and it was just not very user friendly. And the thing that struck me about Zoom straight away was just how user friendly it was. Now, obviously, so the pandemic was a huge, again, not push to the future, but drag to the present. Prior to that, what would you say were some of the biggest developments in terms of ed tech? I know we recently said goodbye to Edmodo, which was a sad day.
I guess it's the whole Web 2.0 thing, previously before about 2005, like when I first started getting into educational technology, if you wanted to have a website, you had to write HTML code, and it took a while, and and there are a few forums around, and you could sort of maybe code a forum or download some code a forum. But when platforms like YouTube started kicking in, which supplied the platform for you, and you could just sort of sign in and have your own platform kind of thing, have your own YouTube channel, start interacting with people very easily online. I think that really had a huge impact because it went from being sort of broadcast medium to being interactive medium, and you could have discussions with people and people could create their own content, and that I think that was sort of a huge turning point, really.
Yeah, it's been absolutely massive. I remember the first time I ever had a student come into my classroom and show me their video on YouTube. They were like, look, I've got a video on YouTube, and this was This was a long time ago. And I think it was probably about 3 years after that that the next student I had showed me their video on
Yeah.
YouTube. And then probably another 2 years until the next one. But from probably about 2016-ish, when I was started working in a school, I think about 50% of the class wanted to be YouTubers. So about 50% of the class would come in and be like, Harry, I want to show you my video on YouTube. Harry, I want to show you my video on YouTube. So it was almost, an endless stream of people wanting to show me their videos on YouTube. And I really found I could tap into that as a teacher, as an educator, and this desire for people to show themselves on video. They don't want to speak in English, but they want to be on video. So suddenly you get them to speak in English on video, and it's like a magical thing.
And now YouTube's that's for old people. It's TikTok now. You've got to be on TikTok, But yeah, I mean, I think that's great. I think the other big point, I think, was the iPhone, the birth of the iPhone, really, and getting sort of content onto mobile devices that had a good user experience, so you could start watching videos on your phone and your tablet and things like that. I think this sort of really changed a lot of things. Before that, mobile learning, I mean, there was mobile learning knocking about before the iPhone, but it was pretty crap experience. But all of a sudden, you had this good screen and you could really see things and interact through it, and it was easy to do, so I think that was another big turning point.
It's absolutely massive. And again, you can see it. Everybody has a phone now. Like everybody everywhere has a phone. So it has, again, it's spread the reach of education to places that you would never even imagine. I know I worked on a project, the Pearson and BBC Live classes, which actually won an innovation award a few years back. So I guess I was kind of involved with that. So I guess it's my second nomination. But anyway, that wasn't anything to do with me, except I was a trainer. Going back to that. But yeah, the fact that from that and being able to join all of these different areas, all of these different classes around the world, I never thought I'd have that opportunity. And, I've built relationships with people in India, in Brazil, in Mexico. And almost all of those were joining through their phone. The teacher would certainly be on their phone. Maybe they'd have it up on a projector as well in the classroom in the schools that were better off, obviously. But when the pandemic hit, the live classes got incredibly popular. Obviously, it was an hour of free teaching that the teachers didn't have to do online, and they could just send their students there straight away. Every single person, every student was on their phone. And, we had classes of up to 500 students at a time, obviously without video, because that would just be a nightmare. But yeah, we'd have 500 students in a class, and they were all on their phone. So, and that kind of, it brings us back to Telegram. And the reason we use Telegram is that.
Yeah, it's great for the phone. I mean, it has a really nice, as a teacher, I kind of run it on the desktop because, the interface is that much easier to use. And if you're doing a presentation or something like that as well, then it really helps. But, from the user experience and for users, it's very easy and lightweight on your phone and doesn't take up too much data. And, and it's a really good experience and a nice experience and very varied as well. So I think that's great.
I always use the I'm pointing at my computer trying to remember the desktop version. There you go. I was pointing at it thinking, what is this thing sitting in front of me? Ah, yes, the desktop. Yes, as the facilitator, I always use it there. The one thing I don't use Telegram for is a chat app.
Yeah, that's me too. I never message. Well, there's maybe one person I message on it, but the rest of it is, going through channels and, I pick up a lot of news on it these days as well. You can go to news channels. I follow what's happening in Ukraine quite closely because I lived there for a while and have friends there. And, stuff like that. So, and it's a really good place to sort of tap into that new kind of news and get updates immediately. Lots of things that you won't get through, UK based news or through CNN or BBC or anything like that. So it's good you can do so much and get so much information with it. It's great. I think
it is. Yeah, I literally messaged one person. We probably messaged the same person, to be honest.
Does her name begin with W?
It does. It absolutely does begin
it.
with W. That is the only person I message on Telegram. I knew it. But yeah, it's a tool that I'm slowly kind of getting used to, and this idea of channels and stuff like that. It's something that I would like to kind of introduce more to the trainees, the participants in the course that I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to build blended learning and you want to build an asynchronous channel with sort of different material there that they can pick up and do in their own time, it's great for things like that. You can do make polls, make quizzes, and post video, post attachments, post links to all kinds of stuff, and it's easy for them to pick up and discuss whenever they want to. So I think for that it's really great. And of course it's free as well. So so any teacher, I think particularly for teachers who want to work independently as well, like if you want to set up as a private teacher doing one-to-one classes or small group classes, it's a great tool for doing that. You don't have to pay anything for it. There are no limits on how many students you can have and stuff like that. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, I absolutely just thought it was WhatsApp at first. I literally thought it's just WhatsApp.
Yeah, me too.
It couldn't be further from WhatsApp. Like it's, I'm trying to compare it to another app. It's a bit like a combination between WhatsApp, Zoom, and Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe would be the best way that I can.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, because it has the. I'm trying to the channels thing is something that I'm. I literally started looking at it the day before yesterday. To kind of get more into it and see these ideas.
I'll send you a link to my EdTech and ELT channel. And you can follow and have a look at what's going on in there. And,
please do.
And sort of, it started off as a channel which I was just broadcasting on first, and now I've sort of added a kind of community bit onto it. So to allow people in the community, there's about 400 people on it now, so they can start interacting with each other if they want to and post things there. But that community part takes a while to get up and running. But
Yeah, I had written down to join it in my notes here. So if you send me a link, that would be even more useful than me having to try and look for something. Because as you know, nowadays we don't want to have to look for something. We just want to click a link. If we can't just click a link, it's no good.
Yeah, too much hassle.
Exactly. I just want the link directly there. It's actually quite funny because I sent a message to somebody on Instagram. And the links they're not a direct click link on Instagram, and they have to copy and paste it. And their response was, "Here's my phone number. Could you send me that link on WhatsApp?" I was just like, you can copy and paste it, man. It's not that difficult. So that's another point about EdTech of sorts that I did want to talk about. Has it made us lazy?
It then depends who us are, I guess. I think it's maybe makes lazy people lazier. I don't know. It might make us a little less. I don't know, a little less willing to sort of work at things. And I feel that a bit. Although I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Now when I see a new app, or I see a new website, whether it's mobile or browser based, I expect to be able to learn how to use it within 10 to 15 minutes, and if I can't, I think, well, this hasn't been very well designed. They've messed up their user experience kind of thing, which is maybe a bit unfair, because really sort of for me, Telegram took a bit longer than that, and and it's been worth putting that extra time in. But so there maybe expectations is different. You expect to get things much quicker and much more easily.
Yeah, I certainly feel that with, with stuff like, Kahoot and Blookit, that
Mhm.
there are guides out there on how to use it, which are great. But the way I used them was I wanted to just be able to click in there and go, and
Mhm.
not even need to
Yeah.
watch a walkthrough or anything like that. In fact, what I wanted was that it was easy enough for my daughter, who's 9, to get onto the computer and be able to do it straight away. Like
Yeah.
that's
My
that's what I
daughter can
want.
usually do stuff quicker than I can, and she's 7. So, but yeah, she
Yeah,
teaches me. She's really into Roblox, and she's taught me so much about Roblox. But she'll still sit and watch. She does sit and watch tutorial videos and finds out how to do things, and then does them. Comes and tells me how to do them. Sort of different games that she'd learned and things like that.
I think that's something that, we have to look at as a positive thing for,
Mhm.
the younger generation with the YouTube aspect of life, that they are ready to watch a tutorial on how to do something.
Yeah.
With perhaps with our generation, it's a bit more like, I want to be able to do it, and if I can't do it, that's annoying. But
Yeah.
my daughter, she loves YouTube, and she'll sit and watch a walkthrough on how to do something. I remember it was when we were teaching her to tie her laces. No, we did it with her. We sat there, we did it with her. Banged her head against a brick wall for hours on end. But then we put a tutorial on, and then we went through it with her again. And I don't know if it's something about how people learn now,
Mhm.
younger generations learn,
Yeah.
but or whether it's I don't particularly want to learn this from my parents. But there is that kind of that desire and that ability to absorb this information and use
Mhm.
these YouTube
Yeah.
tutorials.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter's amazing. She speaks Spanish fluently, and she's never been to Spain. She watches YouTube videos in Spanish and things like. Her mother's Venezuelan, so they speak Spanish together. But here in the UK, so she's never been to a Spanish-speaking country in her. Well, she was when she was 1, but she doesn't remember that, and yet she sort of speaks fluently between having YouTube and speaking with her mother. And it's funny because her mother started to pick up some Spanish as well, because my daughter was picking it up from YouTube because she was watching sort of Spanish videos, and then sort of using these words with her mother, and she started to picking them up, and she's like, "Yeah, what am I doing? What am I saying?"
Why am I saying that? That's amazing. If she does ever want to go to a Spanish speaking country, there's plenty of space here in Casa Renewable for you and your family.
Oh, I'll send her
So,
over.
well, you can come as well. You're more than welcome. As is your wife. My daughter's kind of had it in reverse. I mean, she has had the opportunity to visit English speaking countries. Her grandparents live in the UK. It's not as difficult to get to the UK as it is to get to Venezuela. So she has been over, but it's kind of been the opposite. She's fluent in English and Spanish, the same. But in this case, her mum is again Spanish, but I'm English, and she's living in Spain
Yeah,
and watching TV in English and
and you
going to
speak
school
English
in
with her the
Spanish.
whole time.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Usually we
yeah,
kind of speak this kind of weird mix of Spanglish,
yeah,
and it's sentences are so strange and bizarre sometimes. I stop myself and I think, I just imagine somebody listening to that just thinking, what on earth are these people talking about? Nobody can understand it. Instead of, unless you're bilingual, then you just don't. Well, I'm not bilingual, but my Spanish is okay. But yeah, unless you speak both languages, that sentence will make absolutely no sense to you. So um, there is that kind of thing. But it is thanks largely to technology.
yeah,
Again, we look back to the pandemic, and every kid had too much screen time during the lockdown. Let's be honest.
yeah,
Every kid had way too much screen time because homeschooling shouldn't be 6 hours a day. It shouldn't be the same as in school. It should be a couple of hours a day, but we all still have to work.
yeah,
Capitalism is what it is. So my daughter had more screen time than she has now. And I'm quite ashamed as an English teacher to admit it, but she was 6 at the time. She turned 6 just after the pandemic, so she was 5 at the time. She learnt to read in English from playing a game on the tablet. It was a game called Clumsy Ninja, and you had to read what they were saying. It didn't say it. You had to read what they were saying to be able to move on to the next mission. And she literally taught herself. Obviously, we'd read to her entire life, and she'd learn how to read in Spanish. She taught herself how to read by playing this game, which I look back on it with kind of horror, but also think that was great. Like she could then read in English, and now everything. Well, not everything. She reads in. She loves reading, and she reads in both Spanish and English. But that kind of side of ed tech and learning from technology is so useful.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember when I first started teaching, and I first started in Cairo and then in Kiev in Ukraine, and sort of being able to get, I mean, this is 30 years ago, so even being able to get a newspaper that my students could read was difficult. And if we got one, we'd cut it up and use every single bit in class because it was real, it was authentic, and we could prove to them, look, you can really use what you're learning, because for a lot of students, it was like, why am I learning this? I'm never going to need this. When am I ever going to use this? And that was, to now the opportunity, the access is fantastic.
Well, yeah, it's now there are now no questions as to when am I going to use this or why should I learn this, because everybody knows that they kind of just need it. This is
and
rightly
the
or
opportunity's
wrongly
there, isn't it? Really, it's just there.
Exactly. No, it's perhaps not the right thing to say as a teacher and as a writer, and as somebody who makes a living from materials and such, but there is so much out there that if you were a well-driven individual, you could perhaps not easily, but you could learn a language. You could certainly learn English with nothing but ed tech and maybe a little bit of guidance. I think we still need teachers. I think teachers are absolutely brilliant, but the opportunities are there now thanks to ed tech.
Yeah, I think so too.
Now I've got a question for you in just a moment. If you're just hanging with me a moment, I'm just going to quickly read this out for everybody. That with a Slack group, I'm going to try and see if my technology is working again. Perhaps you could tell me more about Podbean afterwards, because for me, it's been very interesting recently. No, it isn't going to work. So I'll read it out for you. With the Slack group are a leading provider of specialist education and care. They need people like you to help them achieve even more. With a Slack, you'll be given all the resources and support you need, offered a clear path to career progression, and rewarded with some of the best salaries and benefits the industry has to offer. With a Slack, currently have some fantastic career opportunities to apply for. Check out www.witherslackgroup.co.uk/careers. Charlie Burley, the teacher's health coach, has a new event called Rewriting Wellbeing. It's a full day dedicated to improving your health as a teacher through looking at your nutrition, movement, mindset, workload, and well-being in school. There are speakers such as Andrew Cowley, Jen Foster, Kimberly Wilson, Simon Bolger, and many more. There will be talks, workshops, and time to network with like-minded colleagues. You'll get brunch, lunch, and all the refreshments included. It's a non-profit event, with the proceeds going to the amazing education charity Ed Support. This isn't one to miss. It's on the 22nd of October at ETC Venues St Paul's in London. You can search Rewriting Wellbeing on the Eventbrite website to find out more. Thank you very much for hanging in with me there, Nick. Now, my next question, big question, Duolingo, what's your opinion?
I'm not a big fan of Duolingo, actually. I know a lot of people who've tried it, gone on about how fantastic it is, and then given up after 2 weeks. But having said that, I did meet someone yesterday who'd been sticking with it for 3 years to learn Spanish. And I mean, he certainly wasn't at a level that you would be if you'd gone to a class for 3 years. But he could do a little bit, which was quite good. But I think for me, it's not. Yeah, that's not what it's about, really. I don't think that's.
I'm not going to say I hate Duolingo. I don't hate it, and I don't think it's a total waste of time if you're going to class.
Yeah.
If you're going to class, I think it could be useful to reinforce certain aspects of what you're learning. But I did a full year. I actually ended up doing 408 days of Italian. At which point I was like, this is taking up too much memory on my phone and not enough memory in my head. Because, I remember posting a tweet after the full year, basically saying that I'd learned almost nothing on it. I saw a fantastic reel on Instagram the other day of how the world would be if we all learnt languages through Duolingo. I'll send it to you. I recommend everybody checks it out because it's just so bizarre. It's so contrived. And as I say, if you're learning a language, if you've got that, if you have that teacher that's there to help you and so on and so forth, and you're using it solely as something to reinforce and to perhaps learn a bit more, then it's great. But otherwise, it's just in the end it became a bit of a pain in the backside, to put it politely. That to maintain my streak, I just have to do this again, and it was useless. And my daughter was using it simultaneously to learn Japanese because she loves karate, and one day she'd love to go to Japan. And I'll be honest, she was much better. She could recognize quite a lot of the I can't remember the names of them, the symbols that are called. I'm feeling awful now for not remembering. But anyway, she could remember loads.
Kenji or something.
Yes,
like
it's
that.
Kenji. Thank you so much. You saved the day. She could recognize loads of them, and she could say what they were. I said, but what does it mean? Oh, I don't know. She was like, that's Shen, that's Jen, what does that mean? I don't know. I just know that it's Shen. So.
I mean, that's the thing about learning language. In order to learn language, you have to learn more than language. Personally, I think a good language lesson, language lesson, you should come out of it with three things. You should have learned something more about the language. You should have learned something more about the world through the language, and you should have learned something more about yourself through interacting with people and with the content and things like that. With things like Duolingo and these kind of automated things where you fill in gaps or you speak into a gap, they have limited use because they're not emotionally engaging, and learning needs to be an emotionally engaging process. It needs to touch you in some way to become relevant for you to really remember these things, I think. And Duolingo doesn't do that. It makes you move your mouth, and but
yeah. Well, you need feedback. Your feedback needs to be more than an owl saying, "Congratulations, you got 4 lingots for your work today. What are you going to spend them on?" Well, nothing. I'm not a huge fan of it. I mean, I have tried other language learning apps that I think are an improvement on it. But as with all language learning apps, I think if you're using that as your sole educator, then it's going to take a long time to get there. There are so many other ways to engage with the language. Now, it doesn't even have to be with a teacher necessarily. One of the big things that I do with my teenagers, one of the big homeworks that I set my teenagers, obviously they're all gamers. They've all got a PS5. I just tell them, your homework today is to go and go and game with people in English. And they're like, what? And I'm like, you have to. So I remember a few years back, I said, you have to go and play Fortnite for at least half an hour with somebody in English. And it was brilliant because, I was getting my students I was writing a note for them to take to their parents to say they had to play Fortnite that night. and they were, they got so engaged in it, and they came back the next day, and they were learning from it. They were speaking to people in other countries, and it wasn't always. In fact, it was very rarely somebody from the UK or the USA or Australia, South Africa. It was usually somebody from Germany or Poland or something like that. It was just almost never a so-called native speaker of English. It was almost always a second learner. And one of my best ever students, Julian, this was a good 10 years ago. He was a huge Xbox fan and would always game in English. And he was one of the most fluent 12-year-olds I'd ever had in my life. It was brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Some of the natural language he came out with, and the swearing was fantastic. I'd never met a 12-year-old with such an awful potty mouth, but it was always in the correct context. So, I found it very difficult to tell him off. Obviously, I told him off. It's not okay for 12-year-olds to be swearing, in class especially. But he was using it properly. So I was quite impressed with his use of it, to be honest. And I think in terms of, when we talk about EdTech, we need to look at these things that aren't necessarily talked about as EdTech, just tech in general.
Yeah, I think, most of the things that are made for language learning don't come anywhere close to being as good as the things that are made for, a genuine purpose and a genuine use to help people communicate, or, like Facebook, for instance. I'm sure people get, quite a lot out of that, like games, that have a social aspect to them. I find sort of most made for language development with kind of content in it, things like Duolingo, are just a bit weak, really. There's no personal engagement, no emotional engagement with those things.
Exactly, and you mentioned something a bit earlier that I'm going to circle back to now, and it's something that it's always involved in whatever talk I give. I always talk about TikTok, because TikTok isn't just designed for for communication or whatever. It's designed to be addictive. It's made to drag you in. You've got your short attention span. You can just click through it. And it's another homework that I now give to my teenage students. I encourage them to go on TikTok, but I give them certain things to look for. So obviously, that I'm a bit of a sustainability guy. So one of my big homeworks that, one of my game changers that has certainly been for me, but also for the teachers that I've taught, is on a fairly frequent basis, ask your students to go and find a video about what you're learning about, or perhaps, so let's say you're learning about deforestation, find a video about deforestation, or find a video, look for an environmental change maker, and do it on a fairly regular basis. So I do it, once, probably every 2 weeks with my students. I get them to go and look for it and then come back to the classroom and share it with their classmates to see who can find the best, to see who can find the funniest, to see who can find the most effective. And we all know how the algorithm works. If you keep looking for something, it's going to keep appearing. So if you're setting your students' homework to go and find this English video, to go and find that English video, the more they're looking for these English videos, the more it's going to pop up, and it's going to be happening in their free time as well. So you're not necessarily encouraging your students to use TikTok, because whether you encourage them or not, they're going to spend an hour a day on TikTok. If you can help them focus 20 minutes of that towards saving the planet, or learning about the present perfect, or whatever you want to do, then you're going to help shape their algorithm for those things to come up more often. Now, obviously, my TikTok is just dogs. So
really, mine is mostly it's a mixture of British politics and stand-up comedians.
Are they not one and the same?
No one set is funny,
And the other one's just satire.
The other one thinks they are. No,
Yeah.
no.
Let's not talk about politics.
Yeah, it's not a good time for that, is it? But
It is not.
yeah, I'm a big fan of TikTok, and when I first saw it, I thought, oh God, this is awful, and I scrolled through a few things, and it started to know what I liked, and because basically all the things I'd ever seen or people had shown me on it were sort of girls doing dances where they do this with the two hands, and and it's like, what the hell, but the more I started watching it, the more it learned what I liked, and so it gives me more of what I like and what I'm interested in, and that tends to be British politics, stand-up comedians, and jazz guitar. So
There you go. Mine is almost exclusively eco life hacks and dogs, which is why my daughter always wants to look at my phone as opposed to my wife's phone, because my wife's are always vegan recipes, which is brilliant because she sends them to me and we can cook them, and it's amazing. I absolutely love it. So we kind of have the perfect combo. My wife's is useful and mine is cute dogs, which is something I can't get enough of. So yeah, when we talk about edtech, I think we'd be remiss to kind of go to not go beyond these kind of custom built areas, and it's something I think teachers really need to embrace. And again, there are teachers embracing it. There are lots of teachers on TikTok. I look again at Charlie's lessons, who's incredibly successful on TikTok. He's doing brilliantly there, and it's wonderful. It's fantastic for him. I love watching his videos as well, particularly when he has the Spanish ones too. But there are so many teachers out there. There's so much opportunity for TikTok, Reels on Instagram, to be utilized for learning.
Yeah, great. And and I think that's, like you say, that's a wonderful thing that's come out of the pandemic, is that people are doing that and have sort of found a way to put themselves out through that. Loads of great teachers, and it also great that it's kind of democratized the teaching a lot as well, because it's not all native speakers as well. There's loads of non-native speakers putting themselves out there and doing some really great videos and tutorials and things like that. I think that's great.
It's wonderful. And yeah, it's something I kind of, again, EdTech in general, it is something that has absolutely thrived thanks to the pandemic. And I hope it continues to thrive long into the future, because it is a way of making learning accessible. Perhaps I'll make less money that way, but I'm not particularly bothered by that. Particularly with Renewable English, I like for that to be, as free and available as possible. And when it comes to a lot of language learning, particularly, it's direct to learners. It's really useful to have that. Teachers, I think it's very useful for them to have materials and such. But yeah, direct to learners and that kind of engagement thing, it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, but I don't think it's necessarily true that you're going to make less money or miss out on any money as well, because I think that's another thing that sort of come out of this, is that we have the opportunity now through technology to become more independent and to do a wider range of things. I mean, my publishing company, that would have been impossible 10, 12 years ago even, to have that, to be able to sort of, have a platform where I can build digital materials, have a platform where I can sell digital materials, have platforms where I can market digital materials, and have customers who can use digital materials and pay me for them. A few years ago that would have been impossible, but now, that's something that anyone can do. All of the platforms that I use are actually free platforms, or have a free version. So, you can put that together yourself. Even the apps that I built using a free platform. So,
and
amazing.
Which are I'm going to ask for your top 2 favorite places to build, to create materials, as it were. What are your top 2 favorite websites?
I guess the the main one for me where I build out the kind of classroom materials is a tool called Genially, which sort of allows you to create these wonderful dynamic interactive HTML5 presentations and infographics and things like that, where things move around and you can press on them and
I
stuff
love
like
your
that.
infographics, man.
Yeah.
I absolutely love your infographics. They are
I'm a
so
big
good.
infographic fan.
Oh, they're so good.
I guess the other place, I don't know, is a toss up for the other thing. I think probably it's a platform called Glide Apps, and that's where I've built the Teacher's Classroom app and all the apps which kind of pull all the materials together and take them to the students or into the teachers. And the Glide Apps is a tool that enables you to build an app that will go onto either an iPhone or an Android phone, but it's based on a Google spreadsheet. So basically what you do is you put all your content into a Google spreadsheet, and once it's in there, you sort of plug it into Glide Apps and you build an interface so that people can interact with that content and access it in different ways. And it just, it looks so fantastic and it is so simple, I mean,
That's
I
on my
think
to-do list now.
I had a kind of learning curve of about a day. It took me about a day to build my first app and sort of get everything together and sort of learn how to do the different bits. And now I can sort of churn them out pretty quickly. And once I've got the content into a spreadsheet, it doesn't take very long at all.
Oh, that's excellent.
So
Because that's a
tool,
kind
I
of
think.
next step for me. Glide apps, and yeah, Genially is something I've used, but I've used it. I'm not going to say sparingly. I've not used it enough. I've not. It seems fairly easy to use. I imagine the premium version is incredible, but I haven't been able to figure out the best way to make the most out of the non-premium version or the free version, as we could probably call it. And that's something I need to spend more time on.
Yeah, I was lucky because I when I first started, I'd used it a bit and I was thinking, no, this is really good. This has great potential. And then I got this job working for a company and they wanted something. And I said, oh, we should use this. So I learned how to use it on their time, and then and they had the premium version. So I sort of worked out, yeah, that's how I can do that. So when I finished my job there finished, I set up my own account and, I was ready to go and could do lots of things on it, which is great. So one of the great things about sort of still doing bits of freelance work is that you learn so much while you're doing other people's work, and
Exactly.
that's really helpful.
Exactly that. I'd love for somebody who's using Avalian to give me a chance to use that because I don't want to pay to use it. I'm going to be perfectly honest, because I think that has such huge potential. I saw that Pete Clements has recently done a course on it, so I think that's something very interesting.
Yeah, I use my third tool is actually something similar to that. It's a tool called H5P, which is for building interactive content. And originally it was open source. You still can use it as a free plugin on Moodle, or if you've got a WordPress site, you can build interactive activities using it there. But now they've got a commercial version as well. But they've got a great collection of interactive activities that you can do some great stuff with. It's got kind of voice recognition where students can speak to it, and it will give them some feedback on what they did. A bit more meaningful feedback than Duolingo, perhaps. And you can build sort of all kinds of interactive activities with it. And I think that's great too.
That is something else that I wanted to point out about messaging apps, actually. Well, about everything really in general now. Something I love to get my students to do is the voice recognition, but not voice recognition, not send a voice message necessarily, but the voice to text.
Voice to text, yeah.
It's something that I don't know why every teacher doesn't use it. Like get their students to go home and, I don't know, tell them to write an essay by speaking it.
Yeah.
And then see what comes out, and then they can go through and see, and they can practice, and that can really help with pronunciation. So yeah, that was just something that popped into my head when you said that, and as we're talking, ed tech and such, I thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So H5P, you can do that. You can build sort of dictation activities and build speech recognition activities and things like that, or speech recording. And those are the kind of things that I build into my lessons as sort of additional materials and things like that.
Well, that is fantastic. Now we've talked all about everything really. Well, no, we haven't talked about everything. We've talked about your top apps. We've talked about Telegram. We've also talked a bit about teaching in general. I'm going to let you be on your way. I'm starting to overheat in my front room here. It's where the evening sun beats down. I've got the blinds down and everything. Luckily for our listeners, they don't have to look at my sweaty head, but I'm afraid you do. So I'm gonna bring everything to a close now. I'm gonna see if the closing music's gonna work shortly. But I would like to say again a huge thank you, Nick. It's been a pleasure to meet you. To be honest, I feel like I know you.
We should have both had our hats on, really, shouldn't we?
We should. I'm just gonna lean over and I'll very briefly put mine on for you there. There you go. I did chuck my flat cap on.
Down the corridor a bit. So
a bit too far away. It has been an absolute pleasure, meeting you. I feel like I know you already from beforehand, but actually speaking to you has been wonderful. And hopefully one day at a face-to-face conference we'll meet face-to-face.
Who knows? I'm sure it will happen one day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nick.
Okay, thanks for having me on, and it's been a great pleasure to talk to you and to talk to people. I hope somebody's got something from it. Okay.
I'm sure they have. Thank you so much. And I'll speak to you very, very soon.